The earth trembled beneath feet that had never learned to run. In the suffocating darkness of primordial caves, our ancestors huddled against terrors that modern minds cannot comprehend. They were not yet hunters. They were prey. What would you do if every shadow held death, and the very ground beneath your feet crawled with nightmares larger than buildings? 2.5 million years ago, the African savanna stretched endlessly under blood-red skies. This was not the romanticized dawn of humanity you've been told about. This was a slaughterhouse where early hominids like Australopithecus gari faced extinction daily. The fossil record shows clear evidence of gnaw marks on their bones, not from scavengers, but from predators that stalked them relentlessly through the twilight hours. Saber-toothed cats prowled with fangs longer than human forearms. Crocodiles the size of school buses lurked in every water source. Giant hyenas weighing over 400 pounds hunted in coordinated packs that could tear apart entire family groups in minutes. Our ancestors possessed no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. They had only their wits and a desperate will to survive another sunrise. But desperation breeds innovation in ways that comfort never could. The first stone tool wasn't crafted by genius. It was born from terror. Archaeological evidence from Gona, Ethiopia, reveals that 2.6 million years ago, our ancestors began chipping rocks into crude blades, not for artistry or curiosity, but because something was hunting them that required more than bare hands to defeat. The wear patterns on these ancient tools tell a story written in desperation. Hasty strikes, frantic scraping, the marks of beings who worked in fear. Yet even as they learned to shape stone, the predators evolved alongside them. Fossil sites across East Africa reveal a biological arms race that lasted hundreds of thousands of years. As early humans developed better tools, the apex predators grew larger, smarter, more ruthless. Dinophilis, the false saber-tooth, specialized in hunting primates. Its fossilized dens are littered with early human skulls, each bearing the telltale puncture wounds of canine teeth designed specifically to penetrate hominid bone. The darkness held worse things than solitary hunters. Pack predators understood that early humans were vulnerable when separated from their groups. Fossil evidence suggests that ancient hyena species developed sophisticated hunting strategies specifically targeting human settlements. They would wait until the dead of night, then coordinate attacks that drove families into the open where larger predators waited in ambush. The bone assemblages found at Swartkrans Cave in South Africa paint a horrifying picture. Entire communities wiped out in single nights, their remains scattered across the cave floor like broken dolls. But somewhere in that endless night of terror, something changed. The prey began to think like predators. The transition from scavenging to active hunting wasn't gradual, it was explosive. Cut marks on animal bones from 2.5 million years ago show a sudden shift in human behavior. They weren't just taking meat from abandoned carcasses anymore. They were actively pursuing, cornering, and killing animals that outweighed them 10 to 1. The archaeological site of Olduvai Gorge contains evidence of coordinated hunts that required planning, communication, and tools sophisticated enough to bring down megafauna. What drove this transformation wasn't courage, it was starvation and the cold mathematics of survival. Climate data from ice cores reveals that 2.8 million years ago, Africa entered a period of extreme environmental instability. Forests shrank, prey animals migrated, and traditional food sources vanished. Our ancestors faced a simple choice: evolve into predators or join the fossil record alongside countless other failed species. The evidence suggests they chose evolution through violence. The first coordinated human hunt likely resembled a nightmare more than heroism. Picture small bands of desperate hominids, armed with sharpened stones, surrounding massive herbivores in carefully planned ambushes. Fossil sites show evidence of persistence hunting, chasing prey animals to exhaustion over distances that would kill most modern humans. They learned to read animal behavior, to predict migration patterns, to exploit every weakness their quarry possessed. They became the very thing they had once feared. But mastering the hunt meant embracing darkness that changed them forever. Neural development studies suggest that the cognitive requirements for coordinated hunting triggered rapid brain expansion in early humans. The regions responsible for strategic thinking, pattern recognition, and social cooperation grew dramatically. Yet these same neural pathways that made them successful hunters also made them capable of something unprecedented in the natural world: premeditated violence against their own species. The tools that brought down giant prey could just as easily pierce human flesh. Archaeological evidence from multiple African sites reveals a disturbing pattern emerging around 2 million years ago. Human bones bearing cut marks from stone tools, not from predator attacks or ritual burials, but from deliberate violence between human groups. The hunt had taught them to see living beings as resources to be harvested. Some evolutionary biologists argue that this period represents humanity's first encounter with its own darkness, the moment when survival skills evolved into capacity for systematic brutality. The abyss had stared back, and something fundamental in human nature changed forever. If our ancestors could transform from terrified prey into apex predators in mere hundreds of thousands of years, what other transformations lie dormant in human DNA, waiting for the right pressure to awaken them? The fossil record suggests that in moments of true desperation, humanity doesn't just adapt. It evolves into something entirely new. If you want to uncover the next forbidden chapter of Earth's history, follow us deeper into the darkness that shaped everything we are. The transformation from prey to predator unleashed something in early humans that science is only now beginning to understand. But learning to kill was merely the first lesson in a curriculum written in blood and bone across the African landscape. What happens when the hunted become the hunters and discover they possess an appetite for more than just survival? Archaeological evidence from the Rift Valley reveals that around 1.8 million years ago, early Homo erectus didn't just master hunting, they began to hunt in ways that defied natural law. Traditional predators kill for necessity, taking only what they need to survive. But cut marks on fossilized bones tell a different story. These early humans were killing far more than they could consume, slaughtering entire herds and leaving massive bone beds that stretch for hundreds of meters. The Olorgesailie site in Kenya preserves evidence of what can only be described as prehistoric overkill. Hundreds of baboons, antelope, and other prey animals were systematically butchered and abandoned. The sheer scale suggests something beyond hunger, a compulsion to kill that had become divorced from survival necessity. Paleontologists describe these sites as killing fields, where early humans practiced violence for reasons that remain terrifyingly unclear. But the true horror wasn't in what they killed, it was in how they learned to enjoy it. Brain scans of modern humans engaged in coordinated activities reveal that successful group hunting triggers massive dopamine releases in neural reward centers. The same pathways that create addiction to drugs or gambling light up when humans work together to bring down large prey. Evolutionary psychologists theorize that this neurochemical reward system evolved specifically to reinforce hunting behavior. Our ancestors didn't just learn to kill, they were biologically programmed to crave it. The fossils whisper of darker appetites still. Cut marks on early human remains from sites like Buri and Sterkfontein don't just indicate occasional violence, they show systematic processing of human flesh identical to how our ancestors butchered animal prey. The evidence suggests that cannibalism wasn't aberrant behavior among early humans, but a standard practice that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. They had become so efficient at processing living beings that the distinction between human and animal prey had effectively disappeared. Climate data reveals why this descent into darkness was inevitable. Between 1.8 and 1.2 million years ago, Africa experienced the most severe drought cycles in its geological history. Lake beds that had sustained life for millennia turned to cracked wasteland. The fossil record shows massive die-offs of traditional prey animals, forcing human groups into direct competition for dwindling resources. Archaeological sites from this period contain evidence of increasingly sophisticated weapons designed not just for hunting animals, but for warfare between human tribes. The first true weapons of war weren't swords or spears. They were hunting tools repurposed for murdering other humans. Analysis of stone tool wear patterns reveals that by 1.5 million years ago, early humans were regularly using their hunting implements against each other. Microscopic blood residue found on ancient blades contains both animal and human proteins, often on the same tool. The implication is chilling. Our ancestors saw no meaningful difference between hunting prey and hunting each other. Both were simply resources to be harvested through violence. But the darkness ran deeper than simple competition for food. Forensic analysis of early human remains reveals evidence of torture and prolonged suffering that serves no survival purpose. Bones bearing multiple cut marks made while the victim was still alive. Deliberately broken limbs that would have caused agonizing but non-fatal injuries. Skull modifications that suggest systematic psychological torment. These weren't quick kills born of necessity. They were prolonged exercises in cruelty that required planning, creativity, and a complete absence of empathy. The hunt had taught them that suffering could be an art form. Neurological studies suggest that the cognitive mechanisms required for tracking and predicting animal behavior also enabled early humans to understand and exploit psychological pain in their own species. The same neural pathways that allowed them to anticipate where prey would run also let them anticipate how victims would react to specific forms of torment. They were becoming connoisseurs of agony. Yet somehow this descent into barbarism contained the seeds of civilization itself. The social cooperation required for large-scale hunting and warfare forced early human groups to develop increasingly sophisticated communication systems. Language evolved not from a desire to share beauty or wisdom, but from the practical necessity of coordinating violence more effectively. The first human words were likely instructions for killing, where to strike, when to attack, how to divide the spoils of slaughter. Archaeological evidence suggests that early human settlements were organized around principles of coordinated violence. Defensive fortifications, weapon caches, and what appear to be training grounds for combat have been found at sites across Africa dating back over 1 million years. These weren't peaceful communities, occasionally forced to defend themselves. They were militarized societies built from the ground up around the systematic application of lethal force. The creatures that had once cowered in caves were now the apex predators of 2 continents. By 1 million years ago, early humans had spread beyond Africa into Asia and Europe, carrying their capacity for organized violence across the globe. Wherever they went, the fossil record shows the same pattern. Massive die-offs of large prey animals, evidence of sophisticated hunting and warfare, and the gradual disappearance of competing human species like Homo erectus soloensis and early Neanderthal populations. They weren't just migrating, they were conquering through systematic extermination. The fossil record suggests that early humans didn't coexist with other human species. They eliminated them through targeted campaigns of violence that lasted tens of thousands of years. DNA evidence shows genetic bottlenecks in competing human lineages that coincide perfectly with the arrival of anatomically modern humans in various regions. The pattern is so consistent that some anthropologists argue our ancestors were the first genocidal species in Earth's history. The darkness they had embraced in the caves of Africa had become their defining characteristic as they spread across the world. If the capacity for systematic violence, torture, and genocide emerged as natural human traits through evolutionary pressure, what does that say about the nature of civilization itself? Perhaps our greatest achievements aren't triumphs over our primitive past, but increasingly sophisticated methods of expressing the same fundamental drives that turned our ancestors into history's most efficient killers. Follow us as we uncover the next chapter in humanity's blood-soaked journey toward the modern world.